What is the greatest business insight of the 20th century? What if the greatest business insight of the 20th century wasn't about making better products, but about owning the ground beneath them? You may find this shocking, but Ronald McDonald is not the founder of McDonald's. Ray Kroc is. And Ray Kroc once said, or at least he once told the McDonald's brothers, the true founders of McDonald's, "What about me?" They just complained about not knowing who could expand their hamburger stand. What about me? Kroc was 52 years old, diabetic, suffering from arthritis, selling milkshake mixes door to door. He had no experience running restaurants. He had no experience selling franchises of restaurants. But that question, what about me? Why not me? That question built a $1 trillion empire. I'm Allan Scott. I've been in business 35 years. I've sold or been involved in 9 exits. I've started 11 companies and 1 fiasco. I've run a 7-figure solo business with no staff, and I've distilled everything I've learned from those experiences and 3 decades of building businesses into lessons that truly matter for achieving a rich life, a new life. I believe it all starts with philosophy and mindset, which is why this show, Allan Scott, is a philosophy show first and foremost and business second. That if you understand the biography of those great people that defined the world and then get to meet the people that are currently paying for the world to be defined, you get to make better decisions for your own rich life. And you get maybe to learn from history and not repeat the mistakes made by those who made history. But before we get started, I'd love to tell you about our headline sponsor for this season, which is www.pitchcapital.com. And honestly, I've said this in every episode, and I will probably continue to say this until I am proven wrong. I wish this existed when I started businesses 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. I give away my age every time. Look, I've raised capital only twice. I've always been very honest about that. Once through a podcast, 2.1 million, and once over 7 days for $1 million. And I know how hard it is. But the truth is, maybe I don't. Because when I talk to people who've actually raised money, who've spent 6 to 12 months of their life grinding to create a pitch deck, a business model, a money model, a financial model about how it works and why it works, and then put it in a way that others can understand, the rejections, the meetings that go nowhere from people that say maybe, it's a nightmare. And that's where pitchcapital.com comes in. It's the world's first AI fundraising platform that automates your entire capital raising journey. You simply upload your business details, and in 90 seconds, that's why shorter than me explaining what pitchcapital.com does, you've got an investor-ready pitch deck and financial models. And then their AI matches you with the right investors, from pre-seed to Series C+. It handles everything from outreach, it books the meetings, and you can close deals through their secure escrow system. They're basically compressing what takes 6 to 12 months into something that's actually efficient. If you're raising capital right now, I would suggest checking out www.pitchcapital.com. Now let me tell you about the most valuable lesson I ever learned. Today's story is about a man who spent 30 years as a struggling salesman, who before building McDonald's was called Danny Dreamer as a kid and proved everyone right, who discovered that the restaurant business was actually the real estate business, and that insight alone made him richer than the men who invented the very product he sold. And let me be clear, and this might not come across in this episode, McDonald's didn't invent a product, right? They didn't invent the hamburger or the cheeseburger or the Coca-Cola or the chips, which are the 3 things that it did, also known as French fries. It invented a system that worked because the McDonald's brothers were 2 brothers who understood theater. They understood moving parts in a synchronized way that took very little time and performed incredibly well in front of a live audience. That's exactly what McDonald's did. And also, don't get it wrong, Ray Kroc didn't invent franchising for McDonald's. McDonald's had already sold 3 franchises. Ray Kroc said, I could sell more franchises. And let me give you another little tidbit if you don't listen to anything else about this particular episode, which people get wrong. Ray wasn't hanging it on. to the burger and chips business. He was thinking, every time I sell a franchise, I get paid. But then I get to upsell them on buying a milkshake maker, because the most amount of milkshake makers that Ray Kroc ever sold were to the McDonald's brothers, because they were selling so many damn milkshakes. And he was like, this is win-win. And I tell everyone, in life, in business, in partnerships, in friendships, always look for the win-win. As always, I like to tell you that this is not a audible. I'm not going to read a book to you. This is not a bite, which I believe is short versions of a book. This is not even Cliff Notes. These are merely the lessons that I think are most important when building a rich life and building a business for yourself. And that you should read the source material to which I make the notes, to which I give you these episodes. And today's is called Grinding It Out. It's one of my favorite books. It's tiny. It'll probably take you a weekend. It's called Grinding It Out, The Making of McDonald's, Ray Kroc's autobiography, written in plain language in just 200 pages. And it tells the unvarnished truth, at least through Ray Kroc's eyes, about how McDonald's, the one you see today, actually got built. This is the story of Ray Kroc, not the mythology of the overnight success, but the reality, a story of how one man's refusal to accept defeat at 52 didn't just build the world's largest restaurant chain. It revealed that real money is very rarely in the product, but is mostly in the platform beneath it. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to give up, even when everyone else has written you off as too old, too broke, or too late. As always, I'm in the attic and I'm freezing in the barn. So you see me rub my hands, I apologize. That's not me trying to be rude in any way. And if you're listening and you can hear my hands being rubbed, congratulations. You do not need to see an audio specialist this month. Act 1, the spark that changed everything. The restaurant that shouldn't have existed. It's 1954. Ray Kroc is 52 years old. He's been selling milkshake mixes called multi-mixes for 17 years. And it's not going well. The soda fountain business is dying. Walgreens is pulling fountains out of their stores. His manufacturer is fighting a proxy battle. Everyone can see the writing on the wall. Kroc needs a new product. By the way, bear this in mind. He is not the inventor of the multi-mixer. He's merely a salesman of a great product that he believed in, showing that business can be created from great products that are not yours. If you don't understand this, I need another reminder. Check out our Steve Jobs episode, which I believe is the one before this. But then he hears about this hamburger stand in San Bernardino, California, that's using 8 multi-mixers simultaneously. 8! Most restaurants at this point were doing 1, maybe 2. This place is making 40 milkshakes at once. Kroc himself, on a red-eye flight, is screaming, "What the hell? I do not believe this must be a mistake. I'll go see it for myself." Which reminds me, if you have seen the film Founder, played brilliantly by Michael Keaton, it is a great film and definitely go watch it, but it is factually incorrect. They rewrote it to make for a better story. This is the real story. When he gets there, what he finds, it changes his life. In his own words, he says, "It was a restaurant stripped down to the minimum in service and menu, the prototype for legions of fast food units that would later spread across the world. It was simple: hamburgers, fries, and beverage. And they were prepared in an assembly line. The simplicity of the procedure allowed McDonald's to concentrate on quality in every step. And that was the trick." Doesn't this remind you again of Steve Jobs? This is why I put this episode here. Because he brought it down to the fundamentals. He got rid of everything that didn't serve the result. The McDonald's brothers, the true inventors of this entire system, and I say it again, this is a system selling, it just happens to sell burgers, chips, and Coke, is Dick and Mac. And they had perfected something that Kroc had never seen: systematic efficiency at scale. They'd taken restaurant operations and broken them down to their essential components, and then optimized every single one of those components. They made every detail perfect, and they limited the number of details that needed to be perfect. I want to say that again because it is so important. I highlighted this in my book in massive yellow. It's why I'm trying to wear yellow today. You've got to make every detail perfect and then make every detail perfect and then limit the number of details to perfect. Ray Kroc sits down with the brothers. He pitches them on a further expansion because, again, like I said, they already had 3 or 4 franchises, but they were not doing well. They were not doing as well as the boys who really started it. And he pitches them. He says, why don't you open a series of units like this? It could be a gold mine for you and for me, because everyone who buys one would boost my multi-mixer sales. And there's silence. Mac McDonald, the original founder, points at the hill overlooking the restaurant. Do you see that big white house with the white front porch? That's our home, and we love it. We sit down on the porch in the evenings, and we watch the sunset and look down on our place here. It's peaceful. We don't need any more problems. Kroc can't comprehend this attitude. It's utterly foreign to his thinking. These men have built a printing press for money, and they want to sit on their front porch? He pivots quickly. You could have your cake and eat it too by getting somebody else to open these places for you. Dick McDonald says, who can we get to open these restaurants for us? And Kroc, noticing the opportunity like a crocodile would, leans forward and says, what about me? The 30-year overnight success. Here's what makes Kroc's story truly remarkable. He had no true business that was ever a success. At 52, he was battle-scarred. He was a battle-scarred veteran of the business wars. Diabetes, incipient arthritis, lost his gallbladder and most of his thyroid gland. He'd been a struggling salesman for 30 years. But I was convinced that the best was ahead of me. If you know of my work, you know my very first podcast was called the Guestless Podcast. I started in 2015, which did really, really well. It was a beautiful, beautiful beast, and I still wonder why I closed it or shelved it. But I would end every episode on the best is yet to come because of this, because of Ray Kroc, because of the book Grinding It Out. Most people would call this delusion, but Ray Kroc, he called it certainty. His childhood nickname was Danny Dreamer, but as Kroc notes in his own book, I never considered my dreams wasted energy. They were invariably linked to some form of action. When I dreamed about having a lemonade stand, it wasn't long before I set up a lemonade stand. By the way, you will see this throughout history. The sooner you can take from idea to action is the greater you are to all powerful. And if you are a religious person, you will know that every religious text pretty much has this as an example. For the Judeo-Christians, it'll be, let there be light, and there was light. Simple, easy, thought, action. The closer you can make those two, the better you can try, test, fail, learn, change, try, test, learn, change. I love this idea of the autotelics, a Greek word meaning to do it for the sake of doing it. And this is an autotelic obsession in its purest form. The work itself is the reward, not the outcome, not the money, the work. Ray Kroc believed that. He said work is the meat in the hamburger of life. There's an old saying that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But he never believed it, because for him, work was play. And he got as much pleasure out of it as he did from playing baseball. His own words. Years later, speaking at Dartmouth, graduate students, he explained, years later, speaking to the Dartmouth graduate students, he explained, people have marveled at the fact that I didn't start McDonald's until I was 52 years old. And then I became a success overnight. But I was just like a lot of show business personalities who work away quietly at their craft for years and then suddenly get the right break at the right time for them and make it big. I was an overnight success, all right. But 30 years is a long, long night. The contract he signed without a lawyer. Kroc convinces the McDonald's brothers to let him franchise their system. They draw up an agreement, and Kroc would get 1.9% of gross sales from franchisees. The brothers wanted it under 2%. Well, because it sounds a lot less, said the brothers. The brothers then would get 0.5% of Kroc's 1.9%. The agreement included a clause. Kroc cannot deviate from these plans unless changes are, in their words, inverted commas, spelt out in writing, signed by both brothers, and sent by registered mail. This seemingly innocuous requirement would create massive problems. This small detail, this tiny one-liner in a contract would change everything. And here's the remarkable part. Kroc signs the contract, the foundation of what would become a trillion-dollar empire, without consulting a lawyer. There's an old saying that a man who represents himself has a fool for a client, and it's certainly applied in this instance. I was just carried away by the thought of McDonald's drive-ins perforating like rabbits with 8 multi-mixers in every single one. And if you think the good news stopped there, it didn't. His wife Ethel, furious. They just paid off all their debts from Kroc's previous business ventures. And this time he was mortgaging his home to fund a restaurant scheme. The quarrels we'd had when I extended the mortgage were preludes to this one. It closed the door between us. Ray's words. Their 35 years of holy matrimony endured another 5 of unholy acrimony. He's a beautiful writer, Ray. Kroc didn't care. He found his purpose. At 52, after 30 years of grinding it out, he finally discovered the thing worth grinding for. This is another important milestone that I'd like you to memorize. What's the one thing that you think is worth the grind? Because I promise you this, no matter what you choose, the grind is guaranteed. In Buddhism, we say, pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. I think that's true. I think that's especially true in business, where you are going to have to work. No matter what, you're going to have to work unless you become a monk. In fact, they still work in monkhood, or you are born rich, of which, again, we see this again and again and again. Even those that are born rich, insanely rich, wealthy, still work. So what is the thing worth grinding for? Act 2, the red string. The real estate revelation. What we see in Kroc's story reveals a pattern completely different from every founder we've had previously in this season and will have going forward. The competitive advantage of business model innovation over product innovation. What does that mean for those people who don't understand these big words? It means he looks at the business model and completely changes it, right? In a multitude of ways. Already the McDonald's brothers changed the business model completely of how restaurants are run, but he changes it again. Well, they changed the operations of McDonald's. He changes the business model of McDonald's. Ford revolutionized manufacturing. Edison revolutionized invention. Disney revolutionized entertainment. And Walton, you'll hear in episode to come, revolutionizes retail. Jobs, episode just before this, well, he revolutionized integration. But Kroc revolutionized how value is captured. The McDonald's brothers invented a system. Kroc invented the way to make it infinitely scalable and obscenely profitable. But he didn't do it alone. The partner who changed everything. For the first few years, McDonald's barely survives. Kroc is traveling constantly, opening franchises, dealing with the brothers' bizarre behavior. Brothers' bizarre behavior. Beautiful alliteration. Well written, Jason. Thank you very much. Tap on my shoulder. Think about this. He has to get a contract. He has to say he wants to do something, then get a contract, then he has to sign the contract, then he has to mail the contract, signpost, which gets to the brothers at some point, hopefully. The brothers would then have to open it, read it, both have to agree to it, and then post it back for him to do anything. Think today how quick it is for us to find out if something works, right? I want to start a business. I email a bunch of friends to see if they'd be interested. I add my PayPal link to see if they'd buy it. That's it. I'm done. I do that maybe in 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I do that in 5 minutes. Let's say I want to then test it on a larger audience. I build a landing page. I add a PayPal or a Stripe link, and I pay for an ad. $20. 30 minutes? He's talking days, weeks to get an answer. So, here's the thing. In fact, I'd like to go one step further. Let's give you an example. Kroc needs to add a basement to a franchise because he realizes that you got to hold ice cream in a very different place to where you hold food. So, he calls the brothers. They say, go ahead. But, per the contract, he needs written confirmation via register mail. And they just forget to send it. They weren't much good at writing letters, as they couldn't afford to hire a secretary. By the way, this was their words. But they were millionaires at this point. So Kroc builds the basement anyway. He's now in default on his very first unit. Because again, he understood ice creams and milkshake makers more than they did. He understood the space requirements that they needed. He also was basing his entire gamble on the fact that they would need multi-mixers because that's where he makes more money than the 1.9% he's getting of every franchise he opens. And when he flies out to resolve with the lawyers present, the brothers refuse to write a single letter authorizing changes. Their attorney turns around and says, we have told you by telephone that you may go ahead. Kroc this time brings his attorney and they say, but the contract calls for registered letters. If Mr. Kroc doesn't have that, surely he's in jeopardy. And their attorney says, that sounds like a you problem. Kroc's attorney quits. He says it's crazy to continue. The second attorney Kroc hires also quits. Kroc's response? Let them try. I plunged ahead. But here's the real problem. It's not the brothers' obstinance, it's the economics. Kroc is only making 1.4% of gross sales after paying the brothers their cut. Hamburgers, at this point, cost 15 cents. The math don't math. He can't afford research and development. He can't afford to train franchisees properly. He can't afford to ensure quality across locations. Then Kroc meets a man that will change his life. Kroc meets and hires Harry Saburn. The genius insight. Harry Saburn studies McDonald's. He studies McDonald's financial and legal problems obsessively. He's not a lawyer or a banker. In fact, he'd worked at Dairy Queen previously. But he immersed himself in stacks of books and learned the ins and outs of contracts and financial maneuvers, as well as any lawyer or banker. And then he has an insight that changes everything, an insight that Kroc himself describes as a stroke of financial genius. Okay, so let's frame the problem. To scale McDonald's properly, they need to develop the restaurants themselves, not just franchise a name. They require actual capital. Capital that they don't have. Harry's solution? Franchise Realty Corporation. Now let me explain how it works for those that don't know how the McDonald's brothers or how the Ray Kroc's McDonald's model works. You find a property owner with vacant land. You convince the owner to lease them the land on what's called a subordinate basis, meaning the landlord takes a second mortgage. You go to a bank and arrange a first mortgage on the building. The landlord subordinates his land to the building, which is then built as a McDonald's. McDonald's charges a franchisee a set of monthly or a percentage of volume, whichever is greater at the time. That payment covers the mortgage. It also covers expenses and profit. Kroc himself says, I was a bit skeptical at this idea. I mean, why would a landlord want to do that? But Harry is brilliant at selling the concept. They romance property owners with the notion of earnings at least a little something from vacant land. And it works. Ray says, we started Franchise Realty Corporation with $1,000 paid in capital. And Harry parlayed that cash investment into something like 170 million worth of real estate. To my friend Kayla Parker and one of our listeners, reread or re-listen to that again. That small investment, that great idea, executed perfectly to people who had excess and who saw it as a win-win, changed everything. And this is the moment that changed everything. McDonald's transforms from a hamburger company into a real estate company. The restaurants are now just tenants generating rent payments. A lot of people think McDonald's started by buying the land himself. He did not. Another one of the multitude of misconceptions that people have about how McDonald's came to be and how it became a $1 trillion company. This was the beginning of real income for McDonald's. After time, he began realizing substantial revenues from this formula and could see that he was merely nibbling around the edges of this huge hamburger frontier that he was still exploring. Now, you've probably heard the saying, McDonald's isn't in the hamburger business. It's in the real estate business. And now you know why. The buyout that made billions. By the early 1960s, Kroc is done with the McDonald's brothers. Their refusal to cooperate is a drag on my development. He calls Dick McDonald. He says, name your price. 2 days later, he gets a letter. $2.7 million. When Kroc reads this, he drops the phone. He says, that was me jumping out of a 20-floor building when speaking to them on the phone. In other words, he's saying the sound of the phone smashing on the table is him jumping out of a 24th building. And he was, I'm a madman, but he is a madman on another level. I'll tell you a funny story. I didn't speak to my father. I don't know where he is. I made him a mega millionaire and never heard from him again. But I sent him grinding out, 10 years ago. And I remember him saying, I've never read of anyone that reminded me more of you. And I can't help but think about that, like when I was writing the notes for this episode. Like, what was it? Because I was 39 at the time, 38, 12 years ago. What was it about this story that made him think of me? And I think it's the brashness. I think it's the ability to see patterns and opportunity and to take chances and bet on myself because I feel like I've only got me. And I think it's this. I think it's this showmanship, if you'd like. Anyway, let's go back to Dick. Dick explains, we'd like to have $1 million apiece after taxes. Listen, we've been in business over 30 years. We work 7 days a week. Kroc is furious. He says, I can't work up a single tear of pity. Kroc needs financing. Every insurance company they lent money from refuses. They all say the same thing. We're maxed out, Ray. Then Harry, the incredible Harry, finds John Bristol, a financial advisor to Princeton Howard University, Carnegie Tech, and the Ford Foundation. Bristol represents 12 educational and charitable institutions. They agree to finance the buyout. The institution's nickname is the 12 Apostles. The 12 Apostles, well, they make about $12 million, by the way, on this deal over time. And here's the kicker. Remember the 0.5% the brothers were also getting? In other words, Ray was never really getting 1.9%. He was getting 1.4%. Always check my maths. I have number dyslexia, which I believe is called calculexia. Anyway, the total cost of the transaction is about now, at this point, $14 million, which is peanuts compared to what the corporation earned in the years that followed by retaining that 0.5% instead of paying it to Mac and Dick McDonald. On today's system-wide sales of more than $3 billion, that 0.5% that they were getting forever would be about $15 million a year. If the McDonald's brothers had just held on to nothing but that 0.5%, they'd have made $15 million annually without lifting a finger. Instead, they took $2.7 million total and walked away. Now, here's an interesting fact. I did all research in this, and that's not actually true. When interviewed many, many years later about this deal, both the brothers, McDonald, said, people think we just left, but we didn't. We kept quiet and we lived our lives. But the moment the McDonald's went on the stock market, we all bought shares. And we've made lots of money from that too. So they never really walked away. They paused, they reflected, they enjoyed their money, and they went out and they got more money. But they always put life, at least at this point of their lives, they put life first. Even in the beginning, if you remember, they said to Ray, "Why we have a house on the hill that overlooks our restaurant. We're happy with that. We like sitting on the porch and talking shiza." Right? They loved this idea. They understood what a rich life looked like to them, and this was enough for a rich life. And that's really hard for the people that we will talk about in this season and seasons to come. But Harry Saburn, he's not done. He's a genius, and he sometimes makes mistakes because he's human. And I want you to think about that as well. Everyone, genius or idiot, makes mistakes. Please be kind to yourself. So Harry makes the same mistake. When he eventually does have a falling out with Kroc, he resigns and he sells all his McDonald's stock. Don't get me wrong, he gets a few $1 million. But had he kept it, his stock today would be worth $100 million. His lack of faith, and by the way, when I say today, I mean this is Ray Kroc speaking in 1980. His lack of faith in McDonald's was very, very costly to him. Act 3, the One Empire Person Toolkit. If you follow this podcast, you know that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help one person build an empire. Your inner franchiser. So what can you learn from Kroc's grinding persistence? How do we channel this systematic thinking without sacrificing everything for a dream? I believe it starts with number 1, first. Start before you're ready. I mean, way before you're ready. Kroc was 52 when he started McDonald's. He was diabetic, arthritic. He was diabetic, arthritic. He was missing organs. He was broke. But he was convinced that the best was ahead of him. Most people at 52 are thinking about retirement. Kroc was thinking about beginning. There's a tweet that went viral, once claiming, if you're not successful by 30, it's too late. The responses destroyed that notion with examples of late bloomers. And guess what? Kroc is exhibit A. But here's what matters. Kroc didn't start at 52. He'd been grinding for 30 years. He'd sold paper cups. He'd sold multi-mixers. He had failed and learned and preserved. Failing, learning, preserving. When he found McDonald's, he wasn't starting from scratch. He was deploying 3 decades of sales experience, relationship building, and grit. In his own words, he said, "My years of experience in selling paper cups and multi-mixers paid off because I knew exactly what hands held the strings I wanted to pull to get the jobs done." This is important as well, by the way. To understand business, you have to get into business, whether you work for someone or work for yourself. I'm not for or against any of them. I'm just for learning and creating a life that you're proud of, or a life that makes you happy, a life that gives you life, that gives you love and gives you meaning. So the question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you are willing to grind until the opportunity appears, the perfect opportunity. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would talk about an opportunity that feels like it hits you on the back of the head with a 4x4, in other words, a large piece of wood. Most people quit before the breakthrough. Kroc grinded it out for 30 years before his overnight success. Second lesson to learn. The business model can be the product. The McDonald's brothers invented a serviced operation that was theatrical. Kroc, he invented the business model. Guess who made more money? Kroc understood something fundamental. I saw it through the eyes of a salesman. Here was a complete package, and I could get out there and I could talk up a storm about it. The real genius was Franchise Realty Corporation. turning landlords' vacant land into franchisees' rent payments, converting hamburgers into real estate revenue. This is why Kroc refused to become a supplier to franchisees. Many franchise systems make franchisees pay suppliers from the franchisor. It's called double dipping. Franchise fees and supplier margins, where Kroc said no. He said, hell no. Kroc's belief, in his own words, were, my belief was that I had to help the individual operator succeed in every way I could. My success would ensure my success. But I couldn't do that at the same time, treat them like a customer. I used to sell, I've mentioned this before, the business of which I started for my dad in 2012. It was called Lokkima, Lokkima. It meant the big wave. I saw wave of opportunity coming. I love the Japanese famous wood print, the wave. That's always been like my thing. I sometimes see waves too soon. I never see waves too late, weirdly enough. And you can see this in my history. But I was like, every time someone buys one of these machines, I will fly out. I will spend 3 days with them. Day 1, understand the machine. Day 2, what's our sales plan to make this money back plus profit? And day 3, how do we create something that continues? That was it. That's all that happened. But I treated them like they were my partners. I wanted every one of them to be a success so they could go out and tell other people. So I wouldn't have to pay for advertising. That was it. And I realized that was the long-term game. 28 locations later, we sold the business. I think my dad kept 2 locations. And everyone we dealt with as a partner. We signed up with the Westin Hotel in Cape Town, South Africa. And we were like, we'll give you the machine, so that doesn't cost you anything. We'll train you, so that doesn't cost you anything. And then we go 50-50 on anything that you make while doing treatments on people who stay in the hotel. This is brilliant. Because if you're a traveling salesperson and you decide you want to lose an inch of fat while you're away, you can sign it off as a spa experience, right? The boss isn't going to go, why did you lose fat? Why did you charge the company for this? But if you say, I was on a convention for 2 days and I decided I need a spa day, he's going to go, I'll sign that off. He or she or them. Be respectful. Treating franchisees as customers only optimizes for short-term sales. Treating them as partners optimizes for long-term system success. I highlighted that. I wrote that down. I've moved that from diary to diary every year as a reminder, no matter what business I go into next. That's the thing. The business model determines what you choose. Where are you optimizing right now incorrectly? Where are you optimizing for the wrong thing? What would happen if you redesigned your revenue model around partner success instead of customer extraction, customer acquisition? Third, perfect the fundamentals, not the grand design. Ray Kroc worked from part to the whole. He didn't move large-scale ideas until he'd perfected small details. There's a certain kind of mind that conceives new ideas as complete systems with all their parts functioning. I think for this he's describing Steve Jobs and even Edward Land, but that's not him. He said, I don't think in that grand design pattern. I work from the part to the whole, and I don't move to large-scale ideas until I perfected the small details. So, let me give you an example. Kroc would arrive at the Des Plaines McDonald's at 7 a.m. before it opened. If the janitor was there, Kroc would grab a mop and clean the restrooms, even if I happened to be wearing a good suit. Sometimes Ed, the manager of the time, would have forgotten to turn the sign on when the dusk began to fall, and that would make me furious. Or maybe the lot would have some litter that Ed said he didn't have time to pick up. Those little things seem to bother some people. Or not bother anyone. But to me, they were gross affronts to what we were creating. He used to say, if you've got time to rest, you've got time to clean. Perfection is very difficult to achieve, and perfection was what I wanted in McDonald's. Everything else was secondary to me. Where have we heard this before? If you know, write it in the comments. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Apple, give me 5 stars. Make sure to subscribe. And tell me in the comments, in the review section, where have we heard this before? This obsession with details. This obsession with details, by the way, drove everyone else crazy. But it also built the most consistent restaurant system in history. You must perfect every fundamental of your business if you expect it to perform well. So where are you tolerating sloppiness? What details are you dismissing as unimportant? How would your business change if you demanded perfection in every fundamental? Fourth, grind until you can't grind anymore. This is Kroc's favorite homily, the one he quotes at the end of the book. Spoiler alert. In his own words, he ends the book with this: press on. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent or all-powerful. This isn't an inspiring Instagram content. It's the literal truth of Kroc's life. The proof was in the tasting of his pudding. He ground for 30 years before McDonald's. Then he grounded out another 30 while building it. Even after a stroke confined him to a wheelchair, he went to work every day until he died at 81. At last, I felt like a complete person. I told myself I could take life a little easier and enjoy it. I was finished grinding it out. But business is not like painting a picture. You can't put a final brushstroke on it and hang it on the wall and admire it. We have a slogan posted on the walls around McDonald's headquarters. Nothing recedes like success. Don't let it happen to us or you. I wasn't about to let it happen to me. This week's challenge: identify one fundamental in your business that you're treating as good enough. Not a growth strategy, not a new product, not a fundamental. Then ask, if I demanded perfection here, what would change? Kroc would show up at 7 a.m. to mop bathrooms because he understood that excellence is built on fundamentals, not grand strategies. Most founders spend 80% of their time on these new initiatives and 20% on the fundamentals. Kroc inverted the ratio. He spent 80% perfecting details and 20% on scaling, growth. The result? The most successful restaurant system in history. Your job after listening to this episode is find one fundamental. Perfect it, not improve it. Perfect it. Then do it again and again and again for 30 years. That's how you build something that lasts. January 14th, 1984. Ray Kroc dies at age 81 from heart failure. He'd been confined to a wheelchair after a stroke, but continued to work every single day. At his memorial service, they played Frank Sinatra's My Way. Because if there's one thing Kroc proved, is that success doesn't require genius or luck, or even perfect timing. It requires grinding it out. And here's what Kroc has left behind. A company that serves 69 million customers a day in over 100 countries. More than 40,000 restaurants, $23 billion in annual revenue, an empire built on 15-cent hamburgers, and the insight that the real money isn't in the product, it's in the platform. And here's what I find most remarkable about the story of Ray Kroc. The McDonald's brothers invented the system. They perfected the assembly line for hamburgers. They created the template. They're forgotten. Kroc is remembered. Why? Because the brothers wanted to sit on the porch and watch sunsets on a beautiful house that cost millions. And Kroc wanted to work. Kroc wanted to grind. The brothers were content with one perfect restaurant and a few failures that just did okay. And Kroc saw a system that could be replicated infinitely. The brothers thought they were in the hamburger business, and Kroc understood they were actually in the real estate business. Product innovation matters. The McDonald's brothers proved that, but business model innovation matters more. And Ray Kroc, he proved that. In his own words, he said the biggest move that made possible McDonald's dramatic growth started our revolution as a company whose business was developing restaurants and selling franchises to operate them, not just sell hamburgers. In other words, he was saying our success depended on the success of the people that believed in us. And we believed in ourselves because we understood every single part of what we were doing. That's the difference between a great product and a great company, between a lifestyle business and an empire, between the McDonald's brothers' $2.7 million and Kroc's $1 trillion. Ford revolutionized manufacturing to democratize mobility. Edison revolutionized invention to maintain autonomy. Disney revolutionized entertainment to protect against betrayal and poverty. Walton revolutionized retail to stay ahead of competitors. Jobs revolutionized integration to deliver perfect experience. And Ray Kroc revolutionized franchising to capture value from other people's work. Is that exploitive or is it genius? The franchisees who bought into Kroc systems have made millions. The landlords who leased them land made millions. The 12 apostles who financed McDonald's brothers, their buyout made millions. Kroc made hundreds of millions. Everyone wins. But Kroc won the most because he understood the platform beats the product every time. What's your product? What system could you build that captures value from other people's success? What real estate, literal or metaphorical, could you own while others pay rent? In the next episode, we'll explore a founder who took another path. Someone built not through products, not through platforms, not through systems, but through pure, relentless execution at massive scale. Until then, find your fundamentals, perfect them, and remember, 30 years is a long, long night. But the sunrise is worth it.